like a buttercup. You're a Barbie doll. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall. Won't stop till I get enough.
Welcome back, everybody. Hope you all had a great New Year's. You know, we just had to jump right back in with a deep dive into that Rose Bowl shocker. I mean, Ohio State just absolutely dismantled the Ducks.
Yep.
Oregon, undefeated all season long, the top seed. And the Buckeyes just made it look easy.
You know, it really makes you think twice about those preseason rankings, huh? Especially after their first meeting earlier this season, which Oregon, barely won.
Right. Yeah, and this time around, Ohio State, they were in the lead in the first minute of the game, and they just never looked back.
Yeah.
Oregon's offense, which has been, their bread and butter all season long, it just seemed to sputter. Their run game was basically non-existent. And that's not the Oregon that we've come to expect.
Yeah.
Jalen Gabriel, yardage-wise, he had a decent game, but honestly, he just didn't look comfortable at all out there.
Yeah, especially in that first half.
Yeah.
And it's hard not to think that has something to do with Evan Stewart being out, losing your star receiver during warmups. That's got to be a tough pill to swallow.
Oh, absolutely. But, on the flip side of that, let's talk about Jeremiah Smith.
Yeah.
This freshman, he just exploded onto the scene. 187 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns. That's a new Ohio State record for a freshman in a bowl game. They were trying to shut him down. You could just see it in their defensive strategy. But it was almost like he was playing a different game.
Yeah, and it's not just the yardage, though. You look at the film and the way he's reading the defenses, his route running, he just knows how to find those soft spots in coverage.
Yeah.
It's almost like he's been playing at this level for years,
Right.
We've seen some amazing receivers come out of Ohio State, but Smith, he might be something special, really special.
I know it's early, but are we looking at like a generational talent here? Is that too much hype?
Well, I don't think it's hyperbole at all to say he has the potential.
Okay.
I think what separates him, at least at this early stage, is how he's dominating even when he's the clear focus of the defense.
Right.
Oregon knew he was the guy to stop, and they threw everything they had at him. Double coverage, bracket coverage, you name it. And he still made plays.
Yeah.
That second touchdown.
Yeah.
The way he just burned their best corner with that double move. That's not just talent, that's elite level route running. And you just don't see that from freshmen very often.
And to think, they won by 34 points. Imagine what the score would have been if Oregon had even slightly contained them.
Really makes you wonder.
Yeah.
And speaking of containing players, let's talk about Ohio State's defense.
Okay.
Remember the last time these two teams met? Ohio State's days had a real tough time keeping up with Oregon's speed this time.
Yeah.
It was a complete 180.
Yeah, they sacked Gabriel 8 times for a guy who only got sacked 13 times the entire regular season. That's a statement.
Right. And their defensive line, they were just relentless. They were getting pressure all game long.
Yeah.
They just flipped a switch after that Michigan loss.
Well, that Michigan loss was brutal. Do you buy into that whole, wake-up call narrative? Did that loss actually light a fire under them, or was it just a case of them making some, key adjustments?
It's an interesting question. Ohio State, they obviously always want to win.
Right.
But I do think that loss, it forced them to take a hard look in the mirror. Maybe it made them realize they needed to be more aggressive, more disciplined, just more focused on the details. Whatever it was, they came out looking like a completely different team.
Yeah, they definitely brought a different level of intensity to this game.
Yeah.
Almost like they had something to prove.
Exactly. And it wasn't just about proving the doubters wrong. It was about proving it to themselves.
And speaking of proving themselves, let's talk about Oregon.
Yeah.
This loss has got a sting for Oregon. An undefeated season, all that momentum, and then to have it all come crashing down like this, it's got to hurt.
Yeah, especially in such a decisive fashion. You really got to wonder what the psychological impact is going to be, Can they bounce back from something like this, or will it kind of linger in their minds going into next season?
I guess it all comes down to their mindset, right? If they can look at this as like a learning experience, a chance to grow and improve, then maybe it could actually fuel their future success. But if they let it shake their confidence, then yeah, it could definitely have a negative impact.
It's a real test of leadership for Coach Lanning.
Yeah.
He's built a strong program at Oregon, but this is new territory for them. How he handles this team in the offseason is going to be crucial.
Yeah. You also have to think about the recruiting implications. Oregon was on a roll, attracting all the top talent.
Right.
Will a loss like this make some recruits think twice?
It's possible. High school athletes, they want to play for winners.
Yeah.
A loss like this can definitely change how people see a program. But, let's not forget, Oregon still has a lot to offer. A great coaching staff, a solid foundation, a tradition of winning.
That's true. But it's all about momentum in college football. And right now, that momentum has swung dramatically in Ohio State's favor.
No doubt about it. This win puts them in a prime position to make a real run at the national championship.
And they've got a tough semifinal matchup against Texas coming up.
Yeah.
And Texas is no slouch. I mean, they've got a strong defense, and they've been playing really well lately.
Yeah, it's going to be a real battle of styles. Texas relies on a strong run game and just a suffocating defense. While Ohio State, they're more of a high-flying, offensive team.
And then you've got the Jeremiah Smith factor.
Right.
I'm really curious to see how Texas tries to contain him. I mean, they haven't faced a receiver with his kind of talent this season.
If Ohio State can keep their quarterback upright and give Smith some chances to make plays, they could be really tough to beat. But Texas is known for their physicality, their ability to just disrupt offenses.
It's going to be a fascinating matchup. And if Ohio State can get past Texas, who knows?
Yeah.
They could be playing for the title.
Yeah. It's funny how quickly things can change in college football, huh?
Yeah.
A few weeks ago, everybody had written Ohio State off.
Right.
Now they're looking like a real contender.
Yeah. It's a reminder that you can't count anyone out, especially in this sport.
And speaking of things changing quickly, remember when we were talking about Oregon's historical dominance in the Rose Bowl? Well, this loss, it puts a little dent in that legacy.
It's their first Rose Bowl loss since 2018.
Yeah, and it snaps a 5-game winning streak in the granddaddy of them all.
I know it's just one game, but it does make you wonder if this is like the start of a shift in the Pac-12.
It's definitely something to keep an eye on. I mean, Oregon has been the top dog in the conference for the past few years.
Right.
But other teams like Utah, USC, they're starting to close the gap.
And let's not forget about Washington. They've got a young, talented team.
Yeah.
They could be a force in the coming years.
It's going to be interesting to see how the Pac-12 shakes out over the next few seasons. But for now, all eyes are on the college football playoff.
Right. And while we're all excited to see what happens in the playoffs, I think it's also worth taking a step back and appreciating the bigger picture.
Absolutely. This Rose Bowl game, it was more than just a football game.
Right.
It was a story about resilience, overcoming adversity, rising to the occasion when it matters most.
It was a reminder that anything is possible.
Right.
That momentum can change in an instant, and sometimes the greatest victories, they come after the toughest losses.
And it was a showcase of incredible athleticism, strategic brilliance, just the passion and determination that makes sports so compelling.
Well said. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling pretty inspired to tackle whatever challenges come my way this year.
Me too. Sometimes all you need is a little inspiration, just to reignite that fire within.
Speaking of inspiration, what are your thoughts on the future of both of these teams, starting with Oregon? Do you think they can regain their dominance in the Pac-12, or is this like the beginning of a downward trend?
Well, it's tough to say for sure, but I think it all depends on how they respond to this loss. If they can use it as motivation, a springboard for growth and improvement, then I think they have a good chance to bounce back. I mean, they have a strong foundation in place, a talented coaching staff, a history of success.
Okay, but let's be realistic. Even with all those things in place, it's not like they're guaranteed to bounce back. What are some of the specific challenges you see them facing next season?
Well, for starters, they're going to have to figure out how to replace Evan Stewart.
Right.
I mean, he was such a key part of their offense, and his absence was definitely felt in the Rose Bowl.
Yeah.
They have some promising young receivers, but it'll be tough to replicate his production right away.
And then there's the question of their defense.
Right.
They were really exposed in this game.
Right.
Especially against the pass.
Yep.
They'll need to address those weaknesses if they want to compete with the top teams in the country.
And don't forget about the psychological side of things. This loss, I mean, it was a big blow. It might take them some time to regain their confidence. Coach Lanning, he's going to have to find a way to rally the troops and get them back on track mentally.
I think those are all valid points. It's going to be an interesting offseason for Oregon, that's for sure. But enough about them for now. Let's shift our focus back to Ohio State.
Okay.
They're riding high after this Rose Bowl victory. But can they carry that momentum all the way to a national championship?
That's the question, isn't it? I mean, they definitely have the talent and the potential.
Yeah.
But the road to a championship, it's long. It's hard. They'll face tough competition every step of the way, starting with Texas in the semifinal.
Yeah. And we've already talked about how good Texas is. But let's say, hypothetically, they do get past Texas. Who do you see as their biggest threat in the national championship game?
Well, assuming they make it that far, I think their biggest challenge would probably come from the SEC. Either Georgia or Alabama, depending on who comes out on top of that conference. I mean, both of those teams, they're powerhouses with just incredible talent and coaching.
Yeah, and both of them have a lot of experience on the big stage.
Right.
I mean, they've won multiple national championships in recent years.
Exactly. So while Ohio State's definitely a contender, they still have a lot to prove. They're going to need to play their best football and just stay focused if they want to hoist that trophy.
It's interesting to think about how Ohio State's journey this season has mirrored their performance in this Rose Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
They started slow, stumbled along the way.
Right.
But then they turned things around in such a dramatic fashion.
It's a classic story of resilience, finding a way to overcome adversity and coming out stronger on the other side.
Yeah, and it's a reminder that sometimes the greatest victories, they come after the toughest defeats.
That's a great point. It's not always about being perfect or winning every single game. It's about learning from your mistakes, growing from your setbacks, and never giving up on your goals.
And speaking of learning from your mistakes, let's take a moment to reflect on some of the key takeaways from this Rose Bowl game.
Sure. I think for me, one of the biggest takeaways was the importance of adaptability. Ohio State, they clearly made some changes after that first loss to Oregon.
Right.
And those adjustments, they paid off big time. They were able to exploit Oregon's weaknesses and really just dictate the tempo of the game.
Yeah, and they also showed a lot of mental toughness. They didn't let that Michigan loss define their season. They used it as fuel to get better, to come back stronger, and to prove that they were still a team to be reckoned with.
Yeah, that mental toughness. It's going to be crucial as they head into the college football playoff. The pressure is only going to get more intense, and they'll need to be able to handle the spotlight and perform at their best when it matters most.
And I think another big takeaway here is just the impact of individual talent. We've talked a lot about Jeremiah Smith and just how dominant he was in this game. And while football is a team sport, you can't deny that a player like Smith can just single-handedly change the course of a game.
He's a game changer, and he gives Ohio State a whole new dimension that they just didn't have earlier in the season. He's a threat to score every time he touches the ball, and he forces defenses to adjust their game plan.
And he's only a freshman. It's kind of scary to think about how good he could become.
It's exciting to see a young player with this much talent, just blossoming on the national stage. He's got the potential to be one of the greats, and it's going to be fun to watch his career unfold.
So we've covered a lot here. We've talked about the game, the implications for both teams, the upcoming college football playoff, and some of the broader takeaways from this Rose Bowl matchup. But before we wrap things up, I got to get your final predictions.
Okay.
For both Oregon and Ohio State.
All right, let's start with Oregon. I think they're probably in for a bit of a rebuilding year next season. They're losing some key players, including Stewart, and they have some holes to fill on both sides of the ball. But I still think they're a program on the rise.
Okay.
Coach Lanning is a great recruiter. He's a smart coach, and I expect them to be back in contention for the Pac-12 title sooner rather than later.
So you're not writing them off just yet?
Not at all. They've got a lot of potential. And I think they'll use this loss as motivation to improve.
Okay, fair enough. And what about Ohio State? What are your expectations for them in the college football playoff?
Well, they're one of the favorites now. They're playing with a lot of confidence. And they have the talent to beat anyone in the country. But as I said before, the road to the championship, it's long, it's difficult. They'll need to avoid any letdowns and play their best football every single week if they want to reach their ultimate goal.
I know you don't like to make any bold predictions, but I'm going to put you on the spot here.
Okay.
Do you think they have what it takes to win it all?
It's tough to say. They have as good a chance as anyone. They're playing great football right now. They have a dynamic offense led by, a future star in Smith. And their defense has really stepped up. But they'll need to stay healthy, avoid any major mistakes, and get a little lucky along the way. If all those things fall into place, yeah, I think they could win a national championship.
Well, that's as close to a prediction as we're going to get out of you. But I appreciate your insights. This has been a fascinating deep dive into one of the most memorable Rose Bowls in recent history.
It really has. It's been a pleasure sharing my thoughts with you and the listeners.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll wrap up our deep dive with some final thoughts and predictions for the future.
We're back, and man, this Rose Bowl, it was a wild one, full of twists and turns that I don't think anyone saw coming. What really stood out to me was how Ohio State, after that, brutal loss to Michigan, they just seemed to evolve.
It's like they unlocked another level, right?
Yeah.
Their defense was just a completely different animal out there.
Right.
And on offense,
Yeah.
I mean, Jeremiah Smith, what a performance.
Seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, we knew he was good, but to dominate like that on a stage like this, it was like watching a seasoned pro out there.
His performance really makes you think, we talk about momentum in sports, but could that Michigan loss have actually been the thing that sparked Smith's breakout? Like it forced him to really dig deep and find another gear.
It's a really interesting thought. We often focus on the X's and O's, the strategy and all that. But sometimes it really is those mental shifts that make all the difference, as intangible factors.
Totally. And for Oregon, I think this game really showed some cracks in the armor, some vulnerabilities that they were able to hide during their undefeated run,
Yeah.
The run game was non-existent. And while losing Stewart obviously hurt, it also kind of showed how much they depended on him, how little depth they have at receiver.
They were leaning so hard on his explosiveness that when he was out, the offense just sputtered. It reminds you that even the best teams have their weaknesses, and sometimes a single injury can really expose them. It'll be fascinating to see how Coach Lanning addresses these issues in the offseason. Can they find another game breaker like Stewart? Can they develop those younger receivers? These are the questions they'll need to answer if they want to get back to the top of the Pac-12.
Because, let's face it, this Rose Bowl loss, it changes the narrative. Oregon, the undefeated giant slayer, suddenly looks beatable, and Ohio State, the team that so many people had written off, well, they're a real contender now.
It just goes to show you how unpredictable college football can be, right?
Yeah.
The whole landscape can change in the blink of an eye, and that's what makes it so great.
It really does. And, for everyone listening out there, I think there's a good lesson in all this about perspective. We judge teams and players based on their last game, their last performance. But as we saw with Ohio State, things can change in a hurry. So it's good to stay open-minded. Don't jump to conclusions and appreciate that in competition, things are always changing.
Well said. And speaking of change, what are your final thoughts on Jeremiah Smith? Is it too soon to start talking Heisman?
I mean, he keeps playing like this. It's not crazy to think about. He's making a case for being the best receiver in the country already, and he's only going to get better.
And Ohio State, they have a history of producing Heisman-worthy receivers, right?
Yeah.
Garrett Wilson, Jackson Smith-Njigba.
Yeah.
Could Smith be next? It's going to be fun to watch him develop.
It really is. But for now, we just got to wait and see how the rest of the season plays out.
Yeah.
Ohio State's got a tough road ahead. But if they can keep this up, they have a real chance to make history.
They do.
Well, this has been an awesome deep dive into one of the most memorable Rose Bowls I can remember.
It really has. And it's been great talking with you and all our listeners out there.
Absolutely. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. And we'll be back soon with another deep dive.
Sound the alarm. I'm coming up.